Hey everyone, Ross Kluver here with CCM Magazine, and we are conducting a Zoom interview here with a duo that you're probably not very familiar with. I know I wasn't when I first got the pitch and looked them up. This is a group called the Welcome Wagon, and you are based in Brooklyn. Is that correct?
That's right, Brooklyn, New York. We've lived here for a long time, and that's where our band is. And so, yeah, we're here in New York.
So introduce yourselves a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah. My name is Vito, and this is Monique, and we're married. We're a married couple, and we have been married for 24 and a half years or so. We've also had a band for going on, I guess, almost 20 years, I guess. And so because we have other full-time jobs, we each have full-time jobs and always have had. I'm a pastor, and Monique is an artist, and she's been a teacher along the way. Our records have come few and far between. So this is our fourth record in almost 20 years. Well, a little less than that, but anyhow, we really love making music. And our new record is called Esther, and it's named after Monique's grandmother, who was a big spiritual influence on her. And so we're also grateful to be talking with you, Ross, just getting to know you a little bit beforehand. And our music sometimes has gotten to swim a little bit in the CCM waters and sometimes not. And either one of those is okay with us too. So we're happy to talk to you.
Well, it's interesting how things have changed over the years, but also things are cyclical, and the industry seems to be very much a new digital version of kind of the late 50s, early 60s.
Yeah. What do you mean by that?
Singles and touring and, albums come after the fact, and there are a lot of artists out there making music a song or two at a time, and not necessarily doing, playing the whole like artist game of really hitting it hard, going out and touring constantly, putting out a full 10, 12 song album every year, that kind of thing. So that's kind of a reason why there are a lot of artists out there with hundreds or even millions of streams that people haven't heard of before.
Right. Yeah, we, even from the very beginning, our label, Asthmatic Kitty, when we put the first record out, they said, we know you have full-time jobs, you don't have to tour. And so we have toured before, and we like to play live. But as you said, like maybe in the 80s, 70s, 80s, 90s, the way a band got recognized was they went out and they hit all of the colleges and the clubs and the churches, and they did all of that. We've done some of that, but not extensively. Mostly what we do is make records in the studio.
Yeah, we're indebted to our friends because they've continued to want to hear the music. So they've helped us. Like the first one, Sufjan Stevens produced it, and he brought a lot of his gifts to it, and that was really special. And then the second one and the third one were all gifts from our friends who've said, we still want you to keep writing. So we did a great Kickstarter, and we just had a lot of support. So that's what keeps us making them. Is our friend.
How would you describe your style or mix of styles? And how did you even, like, neither one of you really thought about music or something that you were going to pursue. So talk about that a little bit.
So I didn't grow up in the church. And when I did become a Christian, I became sort of, I became envious of people that knew all of these songs, especially hymns. I really kind of grew to love hymns, but also other more contemporary songs. I loved like scripture songs from the 70s. And so I had this idea that we would be a family who would sing a lot and who would have music in our home. And that's ended up being true. I bought a guitar and learned how to play it. And I thought, man, this is what we're gonna want to sing a lot and learn these songs about God. And as we sang these songs, it also became a way of us praying together and be devotional together, to pray to God and to look at each other while we were doing it. So that's kind of that's sort of how our band and our music kind of was created. In terms of what style it is, I guess it's sort of folk or kind of pop a little bit. I think you mentioned the way that music's changed over the years. In the 70s or 80s, it might be like, hey, this is a country band, or this is a heavy metal band, and it's going to be, sort of in the heavy metal genre. And now, as you know, you'll have, folks that are hip hop, but they're also doing soul, but they're also doing sometimes stuff that sounds even a little country. So I think our stuff sounds a little folk and kind of indie. we kind of came out of, we've never, the label that we're on is mostly indie folks from, and people off the beaten path a little bit. We're the only, I don't know, I guess you could say, well, this is not really true. I was going to say we're the only explicitly Christian folks on the label, but that's not true. I think everybody on the label has their own spiritual journeys that they're going through. But anyway, it's hard to peg one style of what we are. It's a little gospel, a little indie, a little folk, something like that.
A little rock.
Yeah.
Sometimes somewhat dramatic at times.
Yeah.
Like some of the songs are kind of like dive into maybe a storytelling kind of narrative. And then some are just like worshiping God.
And they from what I've heard, and I've only listened to maybe 4 or 5 songs, but they seem a little bit more personal and introspective than the typical song that you're going to hear that's like either worshipy or hymn based or something like that.
Yeah. So some of them are. I mean, that's on all of our records, some of the songs are kind of introspective and kind of personal and not explicitly about the faith. And then we have a whole lot of songs that are hymn rewrites. I was an RUF pastor in RUF, Reformed University Fellowship. They had kind of a whole movement within them in the 90s and 2000s of rewriting, writing new songs, new tunes for hymns. So I've written a lot of retuned hymns. So a lot of them are just hymns that you can sing. I've written a few scripture songs, Galatians 2:20, and wrote a song based on the first question of the Heidelberg Catechism. So some of them are more explicitly religious and kind of outwardly facing towards God, but then also I think that's part of what we want to have in our band, which is that those things aren't separated. Sometimes you're worshiping God and you're focused on him. And then sometimes even when you're praying and worshiping, you start thinking about your own problems, you're thinking about your own sadness, and somehow those kind of are together. And so I think they end up tied together in our music too.
Do you think there's something particular about hymns and sort of that more high church experience that you were drawn to? Because it's kind of unusual for someone who wasn't raised in the church, who came into their faith in their 20s, to have that appreciation for the little bit more older.
Yeah, it's strange. I think I could make some guesses as to why that is. I know that maybe in the 70s and the 80s, churches really did a lot of outreach and tried to be like, hey, we're not going to try to be like church. We're going to have it in a school cafeteria, and we're going to have songs that sound like hard rock or pop songs. And as far as I can tell, that was done out of a motivation to try to reach people with the gospel who wouldn't step foot in a church. And so that's really good. I think maybe people who are my age or around it, and I found this as a pastor, they actually grew up in those churches that weren't very much like church, and they wanted to be in churches that were like church. That was a little rebellious to have liturgy or high church. So that might be part of it. I just have always also gravitated towards tradition and gravitated towards, there are 2 songs on the record that were written by somebody in the 4th century. The lyrics, the translations are much later because they were originally written in Latin. But man, I love the idea that followers of Jesus have been for 1,500 years. There's this Christmas song called Bethlehem, a Noble City. And I love that embodies, when I sing that, I'm singing it with the communion of saints. I'm singing it with people from the 1900s and the 1500s and the 500s. So I becoming a Christian was like, not only this relationship with God, but also you come into this inheritance of, hey, here's this whole world of art. If you become a Christian, then Dante is part of that inheritance, and Flannery O'Connor and Fanny Crosby, and all these people have contributed all of these really, really rich gifts to the tradition of what it means to worship God and understand God.
Right. And in hymns, more than modern worship or what modern worship has turned into, tend to be a lot more theologically based. It's not just a simple couple of verses in a catchy, repeatable chorus. There's a lot of meat there in hymn as opposed to sort of modern day worship songs. So
usually, and certainly there are some modern day worship songs that fall into the trap of maybe being simplistic. But I think I always want to be open to, the church that I'm at now really does a lot more contemporary and modern worship, and I love what they do. And sometimes it really has some richness. And David Crowder is a friend of mine. We've had conversations about this where hymns are really rich, but also I think some contemporary songs allow a kind of emotional connection that you might not get. And so I never want to be the person that's like, no, I only do hymns because that's the rich theological meat, and I stay away from those love songs to Jesus that are very fast by. I think anytime you do a black and white divide like that, or the same way, if somebody's real modern, like, hey, I don't dig on hymns. Well, there's some really rich stuff that you could, and so I never want to close the door. Like, I'll listen to King's College Choir all day long, singing, my song is Love Unknown. But I like a lot of David Crowder songs too. And he has a lot of lyrics that are really rich and deep.
We have a great story about him, actually. He's so kind.
Yeah.
One time he had us play at a festival at Baylor. And
this, by the way, this is gonna be a good story. We're not
sorry.
gonna like dish dirt on him. And
Oh, no. I don't know.
Guess what? He threw a cup of coffee in my face and then he ran out. No, it wasn't.
No, this is great. It's like good gossip, and I'm sure he doesn't need good gossip because he's got plenty of it. But we went to Baylor and we were very grateful to be asked, and we were very excited. And our merchandise though got lost in the mail, and so we didn't have any. And when they found it, when
It was
he
already
found
Sunday
it,
night after the whole weekend, and we weren't able to sell any merch.
yeah, and after they found it, he was like, "Is it okay if I just buy all of it?" And we're like, "Sure."
So
He
somewhere,
generously
yeah.
just bought all of it, like not even at cost. Like he just bought all of it, and
Yeah.
that was so kind. So it just he's made a huge impression on us.
somewhere in
Anywho.
David Crowder's garage
Whatever.
are a couple hundred Welcome Wagon CDs that he bought because he's a very generous person.
Oh man,
So,
that was nice.
Or maybe, like unexpected fans are going to show up to the next Winter Jam and get a t-shirt cannon shot at them and expect it to be Crowder. And it's
That's right. It's gonna, nobody can play CDs anymore, but this cardboard CD thing hits you in the Welcome Wagon. What is it? So I hope he does shoot them at people and it doesn't hurt them. I think that too. I hope it's very benign.
So let's talk about the new record a little bit. It's coming out, it's dropping on the 4th.
Yeah.
As a group that, like you said, you take time to put music out. What was the story behind this? Is this like a 4 or 5 year project or?
In a way it is. I mean, so I'm a pastor and Monique has been a teacher and an artist along the way. But I'm always writing songs. And so, I accumulated we went into the studio, I would say with somewhere around 20 songs, maybe 25 that were close to done. And the reason we went into the studio, I mean, that's kind of a obnoxious thing to say a little bit, but like we just said, hey, we love to make music. We love making albums, and our label, Asthmatic Kitty, is really generous. We have a couple of people who've been really generous supporters of ours who said, yeah, we want to help you make this record. So we started rehearsals. It's Monique and I are the only two in the band, and yet anytime we make a record or even play live, like if you are, if you're close, if you're in the same room, you might end up on stage with us because we'll just drag you up there. And luckily, we know so many people are so gifted and so generous and talented. So we asked a number of people. Jeremy McDonald, who was the music director at our church, he produced our 3rd record and helped produce this one. And we went in with him and 1 or 2 other people, and we were going to make demos just so we'd see, hear them. Like, I've got all these songs, let's put them all down. Monique and I will sing some scratch vocals. And we went in to rehearse to do that March 1st, 2020. So of course, that's when the pandemic, we got just 1 or 2 rehearsals in and we had to scrap it. Mm-hmm. And so that that interrupted things for a good 18 months. We continued to kind of refine, and I wrote a few more songs, but eventually we made time to record and begin to put things together. And so in terms of it being a process, we just really believe, we really love making music, and we love doing it with one another, and we love making it with people. And so it just feels like a gift that we get to do it. And when the time comes and I've got these songs, go to my label or go to our label and say, are you ready to do this? And they're like, yeah. and really, really supportive of us. And so that's how it came about.
Yeah, one of the things is about us, because we have other jobs, and the album comes maybe every 4 or 5 years. It gives us a lot of time to make songs that are very kind of keyed into the time of our life, and maybe that's the introspection comes out then, because it happens for such a long period of time. So Esther came at a time when like even like by autobiographically, like we were kind of like life was really hard, and for us, and it was we were able to go on a sabbatical that kind of healed a lot of things, and we were able to come back home kind of new again. And so you might see that a little bit of that arc in the album itself, as the album kind of takes on a lot of our time, and it takes on, you might even see reflections of there's a song on it that we would sing frequently at church, and so you even can kind of hear a little a glimpse of like our life on Sundays, just when just so that you can, it's kind of like a home, you can kind of like see our life kind of like pop up, and then kind of fade away again, and how God is with us through all that. And so anyway, that's probably a little bit like emotional, biographical like sense of how albums are made, kind of, and what they have in them.
You were telling me before we got started recording about the name of the album and the inspiration there. Can you talk a little bit about your grandmother and what's on the record there, why you decided to name it that?
Yeah, the record's called Esther, and we didn't start with that name. We didn't start with, hey, this is going to be a concept album about Monique's grandmother. It was more that we had all these songs, and they were an awful lot they were about faith in God and who God is, but also about home, about leaving home and coming back to home. And as we thought about that, Monique was born and raised in Michigan, but her grandmother lived in rural Ohio. And when she was in art school, she asked her grandmother to send tapes of her, Esther, reading the Bible to Monique, so that she was painting in her studio, she'd have something to listen to. So Esther sent tape after tape after tape. We have 16 hours of tapes of her reading vast sections of the New Testament and Psalms and Proverbs and Ruth and Chronicles. And so we had all of this. And as Monique, she's a painter. In fact, one of her paintings is right behind us. As she continued to paint, and especially during the pandemic, we were all in this living room, and I'm writing songs right over there, and she's painting right here. Just by force of circumstance, those things got mashed together, and it was like, all right, these songs are beginning to feel like they have a narrative arc to them that might have to do with what it means to inherit something, and what it means to receive something from family, and the hard, difficult parts of being in a family, but also the lovely parts. And so we also ended up putting snippets of her reading the Bible throughout the record itself.
Yeah, because I was listening to them as I was painting in the living room, and they all kind of combined.
Yeah.
And I also, when in my paintings, I use things that she saved. She saved a lot of paper, like tear sheets from magazines, from like Farm Journal and different magazines that she had, and she would save a lot of things, and so I'm using them, and wrapping paper that she saved from gifts that she had been given, and stuff like that. So it's kind of
That's
all
awesome. She sounds like one of those ladies that's just like, you don't put her on a task where she goes after it, right?
Yeah.
You were probably expecting, a couple of recordings and it would fall off, but she was faithful and diligent in passing on that legacy, right?
Oh yeah.
And it's also wonderful too, because she would also talk about like the weather, or if, let's say we just celebrated Christmas, she might talk a little bit about the party, and she also was very wise. So she would unpack the scriptures as well. Like, so she would give a little theology and bestow well wishes on me and tell me how much that she loved me, and lots of amazing things, like how she, how she likes to pray, different things. So all those things are really special. We're going to actually share some of these tapes actually in their entirety on YouTube soon.
Yeah, on the Asthmatic Kitty YouTube site for free, we're going to put up a couple of these tapes so you can hear her reading. And it's, as you said, it's really remarkable because this is a woman who you realize she's read through or heard preached to her Philippians literally hundreds of times. And so she knows it just inside and out. And, this is a book that means a lot to me. And we did the Mennonite Bible study with this 4 years ago. And then Pastor Rich, he preached through it. And I read, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is in your bones. This is totally inside of you. And so, where the Bible says that, that wisdom, there's wisdom, gray hair is wisdom. She had, just God had invested in her this great wisdom and this great faith and dependence on him.
That's awesome. That reminds me a lot of my mother who's gone now, but for years we were finding little notes of the, prayer list here or there. And I know she was like a big, she was sort of like the leader of the prayer chain group around town that it went beyond, just started off with all the women from her church, but then it moved on to believers from, other churches in the small town. And we'd find this list of people that were getting prayed for, it's like,
that's amazing. It makes me think of like, you're a person who's worked in the music industry for a long time. So you get to meet notable people, you get to meet famous people or people who have accomplished really great things. And in the economy of heaven, like your mom is probably a famous person. Like when she shows up, they're like, oh my gosh, it's her. Wow. She has this legacy of praying and depending upon God and sharing good news with people. That's really amazing.
It is. And it's awesome when you have someone like that has been in your life and you've got that to look back on too. So I'm glad that you had that experience with your grandmother.
That's right.
Is there something else that you want to talk about? Anything that you're working on, or how people can get in touch with you if you're going to play live at any point, either locally or if you go out on tour? How can people find out?
The best way to do that is through our label, Asthmatic Kitty. So we're the Welcome Wagon and we're on Asthmatic Kitty. We don't have any management right now. And we do go out and play every once in a while. We're talking about doing some spring shows, and it's kind of just catch as catch can. If a lot of our shows happen because a college or a church or some situation arises where they say, hey, can you come and play? And then based on that, we might say, all right, let's try to put a little 4 or 5 or 6 shows together. We're going to go out here and play, and then we'll find ways to get out there. So, I mean, in some ways it can be a little frustrating or a little bit disappointing because there's a part of us that's like, hey, we want to go out and play these songs. And because we have other jobs, we can't. But then there's also some benefit to that too. I think it probably infuses our music with its own kind of character, where it's something where it's it's something that we invest, that we really, purposefully take the time to invest in. So anyway, that's a long answer to your question. You want to get in touch with us, talk to our label, and it's on Asthmatic Kitty, then we'll be able to hear you then. But no tour dates right now, unfortunately.
Well, let us know.
Okay, we do have though. We did a record release concert special last night on the Asthmatic Kitty YouTube site. So if you go Asthmatic Kitty Records on YouTube, we did a half-hour show where we played 5 songs and we interviewed some special guests and we had a good time. So that's one way to hear the music. It's not as good as live, but it's pretty close.
And we have some nice videos that films made for us over the years. So that